GoPro, stop recording. Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. We're here at the Bass Hole with Rob Cloutier, and today we're going to be talking about spring on the Delta. We've got a whole new river here basically. It's been tough. I mean, we can't argue with that, but things are going to start popping here, and we're going to talk about, I'd like to talk about some exploring baits, something that we can use to probe around and find fish. These are baits that are going to vibrate and pull fish to them. They're just not visual baits. Let's talk about the three main baits that you're going to use, and then we'll go into detail why you want which bait at what time.
I wish I could keep it in just three, but
Yeah.
we're going to go a little bit more than three. You got your square bills, all your square bills there. We've got lipless sitting here.
Okay.
Spinner baits and a chatterbait. I would keep it in a 4 bait category right there. Having your search baits between those 4 should get the job done looking for those fish.
Okay,
right?
so we got square bills, we got lipless, we've got chatterbaits, and we got spinner baits.
Yep.
Let's start off with the spinner baits because they're going to be the easiest ones to maybe build your arsenal with. Mm-hmm. And I know let's talk about number one, the weights and the colors that you like. If you just have to have one spinner bait, what color is it going to be and what weight?
Most of the time I'm going to be throwing that 1/2 ounce. If it's super windy outside, I'm going to be throwing a 3/4, just because it's easier to control it. You don't get a backlash when you're casting into the wind, and you can launch them pretty far when you're throwing with the wind. I like that about it, but the majority of the time I'm throwing that 1/2 ounce spinner bait, and I'm throwing this thing everywhere. Rocks, tules, grass, and I'm deflecting off a cover, the rocks, the tules, I'm ripping it through the grass. I'm not throwing any trailer on there. A lot of guys like to throw a trailer on there. Not a problem with it. I personally do not throw a trailer on there. I fish it straight out of the package, right as good as it gets right there, and I just burn it down the bank. And I'll bounce back and forth between a couple different ones, a bluegill pattern or that craw pattern right there. Generally have 2 rods on the deck, just bouncing back and forth, throwing it whenever I feel the time is necessary to throw that color. I pick it up and throw it.
Okay, and I want to show them this thing here. This caught my eye, and man, I like the blades on this thing. I'll try to get up here so you can take a look at the blades on this guy here. Hopefully you guys can see that. And what's this one called?
That is big bait right there. That is a photographed bluegill that he has managed to copy and get on blades. He's got a couple different versions of it. There's another version of it right there. Pretty sweet little spinner bait.
So from there, let's talk about chatterbaits. Another bait that depends on its vibration from the blade. Mm-hmm. Again, are you throwing 1/2 ounce as your major, your number one weight?
For me personally, I'm throwing that 3/8. I like the 3/8, and I generally stick with just that 3/8.
Okay.
I don't, now when I'm going to clear lake or a deeper water lake,
mm-hmm.
I'm throwing that heavier one because I want it to get down more. Generally, I'm throwing that 3/8, and I'm burning it anywhere between 6 inches of water up to 4 feet of water. Mm-hmm. You know, and that's really where I like to stay at and cover it.
Okay. And for me, I like to use a 1/2 ounce because I fish those a little deeper a lot of times, and I like the. If it's really windy, I'll even go to a 3/4 ounce, but that's when I'm fishing, I'll say 4 to 8 feet of water,
yeah.
and I want that thing to sink down, and I'm really ripping it through weeds. Sure. So I definitely have both weights, mm-hmm. and I keep one on my boat, one of those weights through the summer.
Yeah.
And you know, you're using it every day. Even if the fish don't bite it one day, they could bite it the next day. So those are pretty easy baits to figure out. You get a couple of each in the right size and the right color, and that's all you need. Now when it comes to crankbaits, and this is kind of what I want to focus on, it's not so much, I mean, color is important, size is important, but the thing that you really are, what I'm looking for, is depth.
Yep.
And in the Delta, we're talking, you don't have to run these things more than 8 or 10 feet. Most of them are going to be, I'll say 0 to 2 feet, 2 to 5 feet, and then maybe 5 to 8 feet deep. But right now we'll stick with red and bluegill, and for me, those are the only 2 patterns I need. I'll go with the chartreuse or something now, but red and bluegill, you're fine. But what you really are looking for is that depth. Mm-hmm. So when you go out and buy crankbaits, you find one you like or one that's in your price range, whether it's Bill Lewis or whatever, size and depth are what you want to be looking at, and don't worry about buying a ton of colors. Try to cover that depth. So talk about these baits that you have, and then talk about, why you keep maybe 2 or 3 of these. I know I don't fish a lot of crankbaits. I know you're a big crankbait guy, and I would imagine when you're onto a crankbait bite, you're fishing, you have 2 or 3 crankbait rods on deck.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And try to explain also why you have that, because throughout the day in the Delta, as that tide moves or as the location changes, the same bait put it this way, you may have the same bait, but the depth is going to change. That bait will work as long as it's put in the strike zone. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Tell us how you set up so that you have the 3 baits on, that you can cover that strike zone from basically 2 feet of water to 6 or 8 baits you're using, and why are you using them?
So what I like to do, I'll start out now. We'll talk about tides and a crankbait on tides. On a higher tide, I'm going to burn this guy up on the bank, and I like this guy because it's a bigger profile. It's going to dive down.
That's the Bill Lewis.
This is the Bill Lewis right here. It's a great bait. It's the craw color that we're looking for.
And what is that? What's the depth range on that?
I believe this guy, now depending on the faster burn and everything like that, 3 to 6 feet is what it's going right there.
Okay, and
right?
it's a floating.
It's a floating,
okay.
right? So when you're deflecting off stuff, you stop reeling, she's going to pop up. Not so fast, but she'll float up a little bit.
And that's the other thing, I want you to talk a little bit about the floating or suspended baits. And when we get into suspended baits, we're talking more about the lipless.
Yeah.
But some of the variables as far as line that you use, rod and reel, and maybe the reel retrieve.
Yep, those will all play a factor there.
Also,
yep, that'll, depending on how fast your reel is. If you're 8.31, this guy's going to make it down to 6 feet really, really fast. And then it also depends on if you're going against the tide or with the tide. So all those factors are in play right there.
One other question. You mentioned if you're going with the tide or against the tide. When you're drifting down, are you throwing those directly into the bank and pulling them back to the boat? Or are you throwing them in front of the boat? Is it a variation of I'm throwing right to the bank, 45 straight in front? What's your angles?
Me personally, I'm just throwing everywhere and anywhere when I'm getting it. When it's a high tide, talk about the tides real quick here. With that high tide, we burn this guy down that bank. Generally, I like to run with the rocks parallel. That trough from the grass line to the rocks is where I like to put this guy right here. And if it's a deeper ledge, I'll throw this bigger bait right there. If it's a little bit shallower ledge, we'll move in here to this smaller guy and run it down there, because this guy's going to run you 2 to 4 feet right there. So you got the smaller size, it comes in 3 sizes. This guy gets you down 2 to 4 feet right there. So if it's a smaller trough, that 1 to 3 foot range, this guy's going to be my champion right here. This guy's just going to hang up on everything, and it's going to be buried in those rocks.
And do you think that's because of the size or because of the depth that it's covering?
It's because of the size and the depth,
okay,
if you ask me. So the bigger profile, those super real high king tides, this guy's your money maker right here. Those lower, smaller tides right there, this guy's going to really help you out, putting fish in the boat, getting you in that trough, getting you in that strike zone.
Talk a little bit about the lipless and maybe how much not only the speed that you retrieve them at, but the cadence. A lot of these can be yo-yoed in. They can be fished a little differently and more aggressively than the square bills.
Yep. So lipless, again, many varieties of it, from 3/4 ones to ½ ounce to 1/4 ounce, 3/8 ounce right there. We'll get into this real quick. We'll talk about it. The LV, everybody knows the LV. Great bait right there. A lot of guys don't throw it on the river right here. It is a great bait on the river. There's a couple guys that know about it. Really puts fish in the boat to get you on that deeper edge right there when we talk about that.
And that's a ½ ounce generally, right?
3/4, 5/8.
It's a heavy bait, so you're probably not going to throw that up against the bank in 2 feet of water unless you're really burning them back. If you have the lipless, you need a couple of these to cover different depths too. And you have the LV, which is 3/4 of an ounce. You're not going to throw that in, I'll say, you're going to throw it in 3 to 6 or 8 feet of water or even deeper.
Yeah.
But then you have a rattle trap that's, I think those come in different weights.
You got quarter all the way up to 1.5 ounces.
That's when you have those, you can throw it into the rattle trap in that maybe 1 to 3 feet of water and be more efficient. It's not going to sink as fast. You have more time for the fish. if you're yo-yoing them in, to drop it and fall a little bit and have them come up and grab it. So again, we really want to stress that whatever your square bills, your lipless, your spinner baits, when you're buying multiple baits, buy it to cover different depths of water. And one thing, we're not going to talk about it a whole lot. I know you've got a lot of different storage boxes. When I try to set my crankbaits up, I'll have a row that may go 0 to 2, the next row maybe 2 to 4, 4 to 6, or whatever. If I'm fishing a lake, I have a couple lake boxes where they'll go down to 18 or 20 feet, and it gets a little more technical. But on the Delta, I'm usually having maybe 3 crankbaits, 0 to 2 feet, 2 to 5 feet, then 5 to 8, and my most common bait is going to be something like the probably 3 to 5 feet, 6 feet of depth. And the other thing I wanted to ask you, I didn't ask you when it comes to these crankbaits. Size to me is important also, and you guys can see the different sizes between these guys. Do you find that maybe as the tide is not moving as fast, or the fish are not on an aggressive bite, I like going with the smaller baits? I feel I get more bites. I don't think I catch bigger fish on these. The bigger the crankbait, the bigger the fish I get. But if you're just out there looking for fish, I would suggest some of these. I'm not calling them tiny, but the smaller ones. Yeah, you'll catch a lot more fish. And you can throw these on a spinning rod. I want to talk about the rods, the reel retrieve ratios, and the types of line that you use. Are you a full mono guy, full fluoro guy, or do you use braid with a leader?
So I don't use the braid with the leader. I'm not a big fan of it. I do feel that you can get away with braid on the Delta for everything that you use. These fish aren't really line shy.
So if you're using straight braid, what, 40, 55, what's your recommendation?
I'd go with throwing cranks and LVs and stuff like that. I'd stick in that 30 to 40 pound class right there. So, but again, me personally, I'm more of a fluorocarbon guy, so I'm throwing these on 15 to 17 pound. The majority of my square bills are going to be on that 15 pound fluorocarbon. It really gets them down there where you need to be. 15's the perfect size for the river. I don't go anything less for the river. We're in the jungle out here, and I feel like going down to 12 or 14 or anything lower than that really puts you in the danger zone of losing a big fish when you do get the chance. I want to be able to dominate that fish and have the line size to do so. But when I'm throwing that LV or another bigger lipless, heavier lipless or anything like that, I'm throwing that 17 pound fluorocarbon. Just because I like the stretch in it, the way that it feels when the bait's moving, it's what I've always done. Again, I feel like you can get away with throwing braid on these, and a lot of guys do throw braid on the LV. Completely different vibration in the reel and the rod. When you're throwing that braid, you feel everything. It's there's no buffer in it when you have straight braid on there.
Being retired, I get to fish out there a lot, so I'm kind of a braid leader guy, and I will change the length of my leader depending on what I'm using, and I'm doing that because I can get away with using a braid on a reel for probably 2 years, and I can change out my my leader, and sometimes I will go with fluorocarbon, sometimes I'll go with mono. How often do you I know you fish a lot. How often do you change your fluorocarbon line?
Oh, I'm pretty good with it, actually. Being a tournament fisherman, tournament angler, it seems like every tournament or every weekend there's a tournament. I'm putting all new line on everything. So I'm pretty religious about it. I change it out a lot. The braid, not so much. I just look for wear and tear on it, breakdown. The twist coming undone. If that starts to happen, it starts getting fuzzy on me, I will change it out. But the fluorocarbon itself, I'm religiously changing that out.
So just think about that in your own situation, guys. How often you fish, how much money fluorocarbon can be expensive. Rob is a very serious. He not only owns a bait shop, but you are a serious tournament angler, and little things like that count. From there, you're going to have to basically, you say, yeah, I want to be like Rob, and I'm just going to buy a big bulk spool of fluorocarbon, or you know what, I don't feel like I'm at that point where I'm going to be changing my line every day. Go with the braid, and then change out 6 or 8, 10 feet of your leader. It's probably a little more efficient to do that. And like you say, a lot of times if I'm in a hurry or something and I break off a leader, I'll go to straight braid, and quite frankly, I don't see that much difference as far as the bites I get, depending on the situation, with straight braid and compared to mono or fluoro. So it's all a preference, and you guys have to just spend time on the water and figure out exactly what you want to do, and get your own programming gear. So with that, Rob, I think that gives a lot of guys a lot to think about. And if you have any questions, come on into the Bass Hole. You guys, it's out of Bethel Island. Give us your location again, Rob.
6277 Bethel Island Road, right when you come over that bridge right there on the left.
And you'll be happy with answering any questions somebody has come in.
I'm always here for everybody.
And all this stuff is for sale.
All this stuff's for sale and much more.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
All righty.